what it means to be an American in America. Plus, the NFL is the last safe space for tough love. We're going to introduce you to the league's least woke coach. But we start with a correction. 5 months ago, we spent the entire show on a political obituary of disgraced New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. Now it appears that broadcast was premature. A judge today dismissed the last criminal charge against Cuomo stemming from a sexual harassment investigation. Top prosecutors in Nassau, Westchester, and Nassau counties decided not to pursue similar charges over the sexual harassment allegations. The New York Times reports Cuomo remains politically alienated and still faces federal and state inquiries into other aspects of his conduct as governor. But people who have known him for years expect the moment to embolden him, even as many in his party have no interest in opening another Cuomo chapter or revisiting the last one. See if Cuomo wants to open another Cuomo chapter. His fall from grace ended this summer with an embarrassing resignation after a New York Attorney General's report accused him of sexually harassing 11 women. Just a year before, top Democrats had talked about replacing then-candidate Joe Biden on the 2020 presidential ticket with Cuomo. This after his pandemic press conferences became must-see TV. The media, you might remember, called him America's governor. His CNN Bro sessions with then CNN anchor and brother Chris Cuomo earned wide praise from the liberal intelligentsia as the respite from the bad news of the pandemic. Who can forget that screen grab? Turns out Cuomo was far from the white knight of the pandemic. His policies killed thousands of New Yorkers in nursing homes. He lied about it, covered it up, all while collecting millions for a book deal about how well he handled the pandemic. But that's not what brought him down. Instead, political rival Letitia James, the New York Attorney General, produced a 165-page report of alleged sexual harassment. But now Cuomo is, in a word, a free man. Let's bring in Chris Hahn, host of the Aggressive Progressive podcast, Jason Nichols, senior lecturer at the University of Maryland. Gentlemen, nice to see both of you. Chris, you are in New York. We'll start with you. How many New York Democrats are happy that Chris Cuomo has a new political life?
Well, nobody's ever dead in politics, right? People love a comeback. So I wouldn't say he has a new political life at the moment. Leland, I think that's a stretch. Do I think that somewhere down the road he might take that $19 million he has in his war chest out for a spin? Yeah, I do. Do I think it'll be successful? I'm not quite so sure about that. I think the charges against him are pretty serious in the Democratic Party. They will be taken seriously. But never say never. People, look, one thing people love in the media, they love to take you down, but they love a comeback even more. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, you said it best. That was my next point, that Americans love a comeback story. Jason, to you, what is the worst charge against Cuomo that he will have to deal with in this comeback? Is it the sexual harassment or the fact that he killed 8,000 people in nursing homes and lied about it?
Well, I think the nursing home charge is the one that he's going to have to deal with. That's going to upset Americans. Of course, we've all been consumed with COVID and thinking about our loved ones, particularly in the Democratic Party. That's going to be a hard sell. I don't think he's going to make a comeback. I don't think he has any political life or political capital, particularly in the Democratic Party on the left. I have been surprised before. I see that President Biden, of course, nominated the former mayor of Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, who I would have said was politically toxic, but somehow he got embraced. So I've been wrong before, but I definitely don't think that Democrats are going to embrace someone with that many sexual misconduct charges against him. Republicans do that, but Democrats generally don't.
You think about Eric Greitens in Missouri, he's running for Senate right now. You think about this issue about the nursing homes. Quick refresher, he ordered that people who were COVID positive be let back into nursing homes at the beginning of the pandemic. The nursing homes accept sick people and ended up having catastrophic consequences. COVID ran through all these nursing homes. 8,000 or more died, and then there was a lot of covering up of the numbers. Still, after all of that, it was the sexual harassment issues that brought him down. Poll of New Yorker Democrats back in September, 55% believe he shouldn't have resigned. 35% say he should not have resigned. 55 said he should have gone. 35%, though, Chris, is still a pretty sizable number that you just have to convince, hey, I still should be your governor. You think Cuomo wishes that he had resigned?
I know that most people who resign from public office regret resigning, especially when they see people who have done other things, similar things, sometimes even worse things, stay in and ride out the storm. I mean, David Vitter famously was accused of sleeping with prostitutes. He admitted to it, and he stayed in the United States Senate for 8 more years. And then, unfortunately for him, ran into a candidate when he ran for governor who was willing to bring that up and make it an issue in the campaign, and he was gone. So people do ride out these storms sometimes, but, you know, it's hard. It's really hard to do that, and especially in the New York media market where sex sells and it's salacious details that people want to hear, and that made it extremely hard for him to hold on.
Yeah, probably another person who wishes that he'd held on was Al Franken, too, throughout all this. Jason, I'm going to get you in one second. You mentioned the New York media market, though, Chris. You think this has any effect on Chris Cuomo?
No, Chris Cuomo wasn't fired because he helped his brother. Everybody who has a brother knows you help your brother. That's what you do as a brother. Chris Cuomo was fired because his ratings sagged, and the 9 o'clock host on CNN is not a journalist. The 9 o'clock host on CNN is an entertainer who, if he's not getting ratings, will not have a job.
Jason, what does this do to New York politics? Is this a reset here? You've got Letitia James not running for governor now. Obviously, her announcement that she was perhaps proved sort of how motivated she could have been in the way she put the report out. Where does it go from here?
That's going to be interesting to see what happens with New York politics. We know that the current mayor, or I guess now former mayor of New York, is thinking about running for governor. He and Cuomo obviously butted heads on a lot of things. I don't think he has much of a chance statewide, but he's gonna try and run. There are other people, you know, Letitia James decided that she wanted to stay in her current position. It's going to be a kind of a wild thing, and New York politics have always been like that. And I'm sure you all over there in Chicago have kind of an understanding of wild politics as well. So I think that this is going to be an interesting thing to see moving forward.
Yeah, Chris, you say Bill de Blasio has no chance. Jason brought up Rahm Emanuel earlier. Mayor of Chicago, former Washington insider, now ambassador to Japan under President Biden. He was confirmed by the Senate. I guess the question would be, does Andrew Cuomo have other options now all of a sudden, even in the private sector? Suddenly now companies or hedge funds are more able to hire him? He's more palatable because there's no criminal charges?
Yes. You know, I don't think he should be banned from doing everything forever. I think the punishment of resigning from being governor is a pretty big punishment, giving that up. So I do think he will have a future. And as for his brother, Chris Cuomo, look, again, I don't think helping your brother is something that you should get fired for. I had a brother, unfortunately passed away a couple years ago. He did some bad things, and whenever he was in trouble, I tried to help him out of it. That's what brothers do for brothers. So, you know, I don't hold that against Chris Cuomo, and I don't think Andrew Cuomo should be banned forever. I think he, needs to accept the reality of what he did, come clean on that, own it, apologize, and then move on with his life.
Well, that would be a first for Andrew Cuomo to be honest, apologize, say what he did, come clean, and move on. We'll stand by for that, fellas. As you point out, an $18 million war chest by Andrew Cuomo can go an awfully long way. Good to see you, fellas. Thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too, Leland.
All right, take care.
Happy New Year.
All right. Whether you think President Biden's vaccine mandates will end the pandemic or are willing to quit your job rather than get the shot. So, two ends of the spectrum. All of you should pay attention. The Supreme Court could rule in the next couple of days about how much freedom the government can take away in the name of health. These rulings by the Supreme Court are quite literally for all of the marbles. The court heard challenges today on two separate Biden administration mandates, one for virtually every healthcare worker in America. The second case is the employer-based mandate, which the administration says they can use emergency powers given to the Occupational Health and Safety Administration to put in place. Court watchers say conservative justices appeared skeptical of the administration's arguments. Not that vaccine mandates are a bad idea necessarily, just whether the government has the power to implement them. Here is Chief Justice John Roberts.
I understand the idea that agencies are more expert than Congress. I understand the idea that they can move more quickly than Congress. But this is something that the federal government has never done before, right? Mandated vaccine coverage.
He went on to say, why doesn't Congress have a say in this? Why isn't this the primary responsibility of the states? Speaking of the states, Missouri Attorney General Eric Schmidt's office argued before the court today against the mandates. Joins us now. Mr. Attorney General, appreciate it. Care to venture a score for how you guys did up there?
Oh, I'd like to think that we're going to come out victorious on this. I think the facts are on our side, the law's on our side, but the prediction business is always tricky. Look, you're right. This was a big-time showdown at the Supreme Court today. And the central question, and by the way, one of the most consequential cases, I think, in the history of our republic as relates to individual liberty and freedom. And the central question, as you outlined, is can an agency like this, that's not been specifically charged to do anything with by Congress or the Constitution for that matter, on vaccine mandates, go ahead and do it anyway? And as Justice Alito said, try to squeeze an elephant into a mouse hole. That's the question. And I think that the result of this case, if it goes the wrong way, there's no limiting principle. There's not much that an agency can't do.
Yeah, no, that was my next question. If the court allows this, what could come next?
Well, as long as it's an emergency and it's related to health, it'd be really hard to figure out what they couldn't do. And I'll give you a couple of examples. One would be, they've already signaled that climate change is an existential threat, and we're at the tipping point. And it's something we have to take immediate action on. It's not too far-fetched to think that they would charge the Department of Transportation or the EPA to tell you what you can drive and when you can drive it, things like that. Elections would be...
Yeah, no, you make a good point that if you tie it to emergency powers, you declare anything an emergency, suddenly every type of restriction comes into play. Specific to the workplace issue with this, which is OSHA saying for anybody who employs more than 100 people, the employer has to either mandate the vaccine or provide testing. Here's Justice Kagan. Take a listen.
I would think that workplace risk is about the greatest, least controllable risk with respect to COVID that any person has. Everything else a person can control.
I'm not quite sure what her argument was. I guess that those who are vaccinated would be affected by the unvaccinated?
Well, I'm not following either, but what an issue there is OSHA. What was OSHA created to do? To deal with like machinery and make sure forklifts beep when they back up, and then you've got a shower stall next to chemicals. That's what OSHA's intention, or that's what Congress intended OSHA to do, not force the vaccination of 80+ million Americans, a medical procedure that once it's done, right? That's never been what OSHA's been charged to do. And that's what's central in this case too, is what are these agencies supposed to be doing? And is there any authorization from Congress to do this? And there just isn't.
Yeah, I guess if you think about what Justice Kagan was saying is that people have to go to work to provide for their families. So that's where they would be exposed to someone who is unvaccinated. It's interesting because you just brought up sort of what OSHA was designed to do and what it can and can't regulate. That's exactly what Justice Kavanaugh asked your Deputy Attorney General. Take a listen.
How is a vaccine different in kind from your perspective from, say, the requirement to wear gloves or the requirement to wash your hands?
Masks can come off, gloves can come off. A vaccine requirement, the taking a vaccine is a permanent medical procedure that cannot come off after work is over.
Is your issue with the vaccine mandate or who's mandating it? Because I'm sure there's businesses in Missouri that have vaccine mandates for their employees, and I'm guessing you don't have a problem with that.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that, but on different grounds. States generally have police powers. The federal government is a government of limited powers that was created by the states to do certain things, enumerated powers like securing the border, making sure that we have a military that protects the country, requiring, vaccinations for 100 million Missourians or 100 million Americans isn't one of those. So the question which you're getting at here is, who gets to decide this? Arguably, Congress could. They never have. I would argue that maybe Congress doesn't have the authority, but if they did, they would be the ones to be able to do it. Not an unelected bureaucrat that again is trying to pigeonhole a regulation here or a mandate into a regulation that never called for this. And that's the big issue here, Leland, is how much power authority we're going to give these agencies.
I just want to get to one point in a minute, but I just want to get you on record on this. There are companies in Missouri that have vaccine mandates, and you haven't sued them and tried to go after them, right?
Well, there's no state law allowing me to do that. That's, I think, an important
right. But I'm just saying that there's no law that allows that. Therefore, your hands are pretty much tied.
That's correct. Okay. If the state were to pass a law banning that, then I would have the authority to do it. Here, it's different. We're saying, federal government, you have no authority to do this.
It's interesting, and that's this issue of authority has been come up so many times. Ron Klain, the White House chief of staff, retweeted something talking about authority. Most economic problems we're facing, inflation, supply chains, are high-class problems. We wouldn't have them if the unemployment rate was still 10%, which would have been a much worse problem. This is the wrong Ron Klain tweet. The Ron Klain tweet I was talking about is the one where he retweeted someone saying, essentially, this is a workaround from COVID, from workaround in terms of what the federal powers are allowed to do, have OSHA do it. It can't be challenged in the same way. How much of a role is that going to play in this case?
Well, Chief Justice Roberts today in oral arguments brought that up, and then I think Justice Kavanaugh or Alito brought it up as well, where they said, it was Justice Gorsuch, isn't this just a workaround because Congress hasn't done it? Look, Congress has taken action on COVID. We spent trillions of dollars, have changed some rules related to long-term care facilities. They've taken action. But the elected representatives of this republic have never said we want to require a vaccine. And so what they're getting at is, yeah, this is a workaround. Something you can't convince Congress to do, you go have an agency do. And that's the wrong way to approach these issues.
Yeah, well, the Wall Street Journal made the same point you did, which is that really what it means to be an American in separation of powers is at risk here, or is subject to this ruling, because it'll have such far-ranging implications. Mr. Attorney General, we always appreciate you joining us, and there's going to be a lot more on this case. As it develops, please come back and talk to us about it, all right?
Good to be with you again. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. All right, continuing on the COVID idea, health first, freedom second. We're going to show you how COVID restrictions are changing the very nature of democratic society abroad. Will it come to the United States? Plus, President Biden visited wildfire victims in Colorado. What they told them they needed, it isn't presidential sympathy. They want something very specific. We're going to explain when we come back. President Biden met with wildfire survivors this afternoon near Boulder, Colorado. Losses from last week's Marshall wildfire are going to reach $1 billion. More than 1,000 homes were destroyed. Hundreds more were damaged in what was the most destructive fire in that state's history. Mr. Biden has pledged to help survivors rebuild in any way he can, but it's unclear what he can do to offset the huge rebuilding costs. Many homeowners, as you can see, they've lost absolutely everything, do not have enough coverage because of the high insurance rates. Add to that the shortage of workers and rising costs of lumber, and that's leaving many homeowners with a huge gap between what insurance will pay and what it's going to cost to rebuild their homes. Joining us now, Ross Kaminsky on Colorado's KOA Radio. He aptly hosts a podcast, also the Ross Kaminsky Show. Ross, good to see you, my friend.
Hey, thanks for having me, Leland.
This seems sort of adding insult to injury here for these folks.
No doubt, and I'll add one other factor to the correct stuff that you already mentioned. We've had here in Colorado some of the fastest growing real estate prices in the country. I think we're fifth now in median home price of all the states. And since a lot of these prices have gone up so fast, it's very likely that a lot of these people are underinsured, right? Maybe they've got a house that's worth $1 million now and might cost close to that to rebuild. And maybe they're only insured for half of that and they thought it was plenty at the time, but they forgot to keep up with the price appreciation here in Colorado.
Yeah, what I thought was interesting, not only is there huge price appreciation, but the insurance rates in Colorado, $1,600 a year for the average U.S. homeowner, $3,300, almost $3,400 for the average Colorado homeowner. You add on top of that how much building prices have increased, how busy builders are in Colorado because of the housing boom. What's going to happen? Are these people going to get foreclosed on?
So there are some federal programs that are supposed to require banks to hold off on foreclosure for federally guaranteed loans for people who live in places that are the subject of a presidential disaster declaration, which this is already. But still, if these folks owned homes for a long time, maybe someone bought a home for $100,000 that's worth $600,000 now. Maybe they don't have a lot of money. Maybe it's only insured for $300,000. What are they going to do? It's unclear that even if they could get a loan, and they probably could theoretically to pay for the difference, could they afford that mortgage? Maybe not. So I was talking with a contractor friend of mine who's out there talking to people, and a conversation that's coming up a lot is that some people may be forced to simply sell their land, which is maybe worth more than the home if they had an inexpensive home, sell the land, assign the insurance rights to someone, and walk away.
God, it's just heartbreaking when you look at these pictures about what happened. This happened over the holidays. I don't want to say it was a story that was missed by the national media, but just because everybody was out on the holidays and not really paying attention, it may not have gotten the coverage it deserved. This only happened in just a couple of hours. And you look at all the snow, how did you have a wildfire that destroyed 1,000 homes and $1 billion of damage in the middle of the winter in Colorado?
So for the previous several days, it had been warm and dry. And actually, I saw an unbelievable statistic, Leland. In the last 6 months of 2021, Death Valley had more precipitation than Denver. So it was very, very dry. And we had this cold front coming in that was bringing the snow. But because the cold front was so cold and the warm front that was here was so warm, it created these enormous winds. And in that area, you had consistent 50-mile-an-hour winds and 80 and 100-mile-an-hour gusts. And so what really fueled this thing was wind pushing embers from one home to another.
Wow.
It wasn't what you normally think of in Colorado. You think of forest fires. It wasn't that. This is the suburbs.
You think about, it's stunning when you look at the pictures and the destruction. And it's one of the reasons we wanted to have you on to talk about this. You think about the cost of lumber to rebuild all of these homes. It's gone from $350 per thousand board feet in March 2020 to $1,052 per thousand board feet today, almost 3x, pretty much exactly 3x. You were a commodities trader for a long time. Is there anything the government could do? Is there anything President Biden could do to help these people in a way that would actually help them, do them some good?
Yeah, I don't know how long it would take to have an effect. If you're asking me about like an economic policy, it would be reduced tariffs on imports of lumber. President Biden actually recently increased tariffs on Canadian lumber. It didn't get any coverage in the news, but he did that. You could lower tariffs on steel and other things like that, but I don't know how long it would take to make a difference. And it's not just wood, steel, aluminum. I don't know when the last time is you tried to buy something electrical at Home Depot. You cannot find this stuff. And a contractor friend of mine, I think I mentioned him earlier, said building a house now versus building the same house 2-3 years ago, it's probably at least double when you add in also the fact that the cost of labor has exploded.
Yeah, I don't know if we have the video of President Biden queued up, but there were a number of people who met him in shorts in the middle of January in Colorado because it's the only clothes they owned. Those aren't the shorts people, but there were a number of them there. So, Ross, I know you guys on the radio are doing a lot to try to help these folks, and sure appreciate taking the time to talk. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. You too, Leland.
Thank you. COVID has led to crackdowns and lockdowns around the world. Are those restrictions changing the nature of democratic society? A lot of people think so, and numbers are out protesting because they're angry about it. We'll go around the world when we come back. From London to Tunisia to Australia, we have seen some vicious riots over COVID restrictions. And if we had the video we planned, you would be seeing those protesters right now. Here they are, demanding an end to what they consider extreme measures. This is a headline from France. We'll stick on the riot video for just a minute. London, upper left, Tunisia, upper right, and then Australia. We'll drop the banner. Those are hundreds of thousands of people in Australia out protesting the lockdowns and restrictions in that country. This is the headline from France 24. Health first, freedom second, how COVID is changing democracies. While public acceptance of COVID restrictions was high at the outset of the crisis, pandemic fatigue is fueling growing resistance to new curbs. The unvaccinated complain perhaps rightly so, of discrimination. Life for the unvaccinated is becoming more and more difficult by the day, and that is by the design of our leaders. In fact, some world leaders are taking drastic steps to get people to roll up their sleeves. Here's the French president earlier this week. It's in French, but watch the subtitles.
Dans certains de mes propos, j'ai blessé des gens. Et je pense qu'on peut bouger les choses sans blesser des gens. Et c'est ça que je ne referai plus.
I really want to piss them off. We will continue to do it, he said, and he wasn't joking. French police have been out in force checking people's vaccination cards, even those who are quite literally just out on the streets. Data from Oxford shows France has some of the most stringent COVID measures in the world. The countries you see in red are some of the others, including China, Canada, Germany, and Peru. So China and France are the most restrictive. Here are some of the most stringent policies or recommendations we found. In France, people need to fill out a form just to leave their house. In Abu Dhabi, the government made people wear wristbands to make sure they stayed in quarantine. Mexico banned some junk foods to protect high-risk patients. Spain barred speaking on public transportation. Panama came up with designated days when people could go outside based on their sex. South Africa banned cigarettes. Canada recommended wearing a mask during sex. Before you can say it can't happen in the United States, consider all the normal freedoms denied in the name of health. In Michigan, the governor forced businesses to only advertise groceries and medical supplies. Neighbors in Vermont were told not to gather at all, even outdoors. Some parts of New York had a ban on leaf blowers over fears the virus would spread faster. The mayor of Louisville banned drive-through church services. And in California, some people face fines for watching the sunset on the beach. The difference in Europe is that people are losing their freedoms in the name of health. Here in the United States, people are still being forced to choose between freedom and health. Although there are certainly politicians who are punishing people in America, or would like to punish people in America, like the Europeans do. We pick it up there with veteran journalist John Moody, former executive VP at Fox News, author of Course They Knew, and former Time Magazine Rome bureau chief. Mr. Moody, good to see you, sir, as always. You think about France, you think about a liberal democracy, and now they've got as restrictive COVID measures as China. How is that possible?
Well, Leland, I think that a lot of these democratically elected leaders are forgetting that that's exactly what they are. They were elected. They weren't given God's grace to do this job. Some of them think that they're emperors. And, President Macron in particular ought to remember that somebody else in France named Marie Antoinette was so out of touch with her people that she said, let them eat cake when there were bread shortages. And that didn't end well for her.
Yeah, we're watching these really violent protests between police and anti-lockdown, anti-vaccine mandate folks. You can imagine that it wouldn't take much longer for this to become really combustible. Are we to believe that if it can happen in a democracy like France, it could happen in a democracy like the United States?
Well, sure. Look, I mean, France is a country where usually the population accepts leaders' decisions. They're not lawbreakers by and large. They had some riots a couple of years ago. But France is a law-abiding country, and it's an indication of just how angry the people are that they're being given conflicting information by leaders who then say, don't question us, don't ask us why we're saying this, just do what we said, and when we change our minds, then do what we said most recently.
I'm struck by the video that we found. Australia, France, the UK, Tunisia, some things out of the Netherlands. Why don't you think this video is running on the evening news of major American networks every night?
Now, there's a good question, Leland. I think it doesn't fit their narrative. I think the mainstream media wants Americans to just give in and do as they're told, accept whatever they're told to do, get along, don't make trouble. And yeah, this video is incendiary in all of those countries. And then the boneheaded regulations that you just listed for various states. I mean, the only one I agree with is ban leaf blowers because they make too much noise, but not because they spread COVID.
Well, there's some places that only want electric leaf blowers. They make less noise, but that's a different conversation. That's the climate change conversation. We won't get there. Interesting, though, the other country that has had sort of draconian lockdowns that we didn't get to is New Zealand. And here is the New Zealand Prime Minister explaining her philosophy. Take a listen.
So you basically see this is going to be like, well, it's almost like, you probably don't see it like this, the two different classes of people. If you're vaccinated or if you're unvaccinated, you have all these rights. If you are vaccinated...
That is what it is. So, yep.
So there it is. There's two different classes of people. And here's the protest video from those who are upset in New Zealand. Obviously, the United States is different in that we believe our rights come from God. Every other constitution, even democracies, believe their rights come from the government. Does that provide us any protection?
Well, it should, Leland. I'm not sure that it does these days. God has become a dirty word in our country, and it's a shame. But and the New Zealand Prime Minister clearly is overstepping her authority when she talks that way. If she had said black and white people, then imagine what the response would have been. But it's unvaccinated people, and that's okay to discriminate against. It just doesn't make sense.
We played what the New Zealand Prime Minister said. Now we're going to play what President Biden just said about the unvaccinated on Wednesday. Take a listen.
So there's no excuse for anyone being unvaccinated. This continues to be a pandemic of the unvaccinated. We're seeing COVID-19 cases among vaccinated in workplaces across America, including here at the White House.
How big of a stretch it is to go from no excuse to you're a second-class citizen if you don't?
President Biden just wasn't on the mark with those remarks that he made. He also, made the mistake of saying that we have reason to be optimistic in 2020, getting the year wrong. Look, he sounds like an old man who tells his grandchildren that he walked 2 miles to school every day, all the way uphill both ways. He's just sounding like a scold. He is not sounding like a president, and he's certainly not sounding like a problem solver.
Yeah, now at least if we are to believe the reporting, he's going to pivot and sort of say now COVID's the state's problems and try to move on. Hey, it was always good to see you, sir. We appreciate the perspective and the thoughts, especially the overseas experience.
Leland, keep up the great work.
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you. All right, coming up, police behaving badly. We're going to tell you about some of the questionable tactics used by the Seattle Police Department. And you have to wonder, who possibly thought what they did was a good idea? We'll tell you when we come back. We are ordinarily supportive of police, and you always try to give them the benefit of the doubt. They are doing a hard job under oftentimes very difficult conditions. So we'll go into this story with that in mind. For the Seattle Police Department, who saw some of the most violent protests during the height of the Black Lives Matter unrest nearly 2 years ago, following the murder of George Floyd, we're now learning that some of the Seattle cops actively spread disinformation, supposedly in an attempt to quell the mayhem, and it was a mayhem. The Seattle Times reports police faked radio chatter about far-right Proud Boy members marching to confront protesters and possibly carrying guns as a ruse to try and get the protesters to back off. The fake calls were sent on a night in June 2020 when police had just abandoned their East Precinct. A Seattle activist posted this audio of some of the apparent radio chatter.
Other Proud Boys is coming down here. Seems like they're kind of starting to muster up, maybe thinking about marching around. Haven't seen any long weapons. Might be one.
Shockingly, that ruse didn't work. Ended up just exacerbating a volatile situation, according to the city's police watchdog. The precinct captain who ordered it, Brian Gernon, reportedly told officials he was looking for an innocent way to just throw out some distraction. At the time, the department was short-staffed and under pressure. Let's bring in David Katz, former DEA senior special agent, founder and CEO of Global Security Group. David, is this as bad of an idea as it seems?
Well, let me give some context because you hit on the key point. These were some of the most violent demonstrations. They're not demonstrations, they're riots.
Fair.
Officers were vastly outmanned, and most importantly, working in a town where the mayor, the city council, the prosecutor is not on their side. So I understand from that perspective, like, we got to come up with something. Remember, these miscreants who set up CHOP, who were committing all these acts of violence, they're monitoring police channels. Well, why are they doing that? They're doing that because when they're listening to police calls, they can deploy their forces elsewhere. Okay, they're starting a fire. They're breaking windows. They get a police call. The units are responding. Well, guess what? They go someplace else. Where I find fault with this is, when you start talking about other groups, armed militia, that I think was ill-advised. But I can't blanketly say, well, the misinformation part was just a no-go, because there may be some validity to it. I just didn't like the way they actually.
Yeah, it's sort of maybe an okay idea, poorly carried out, especially because when you start talking about people wandering around with guns, everybody pulls out more guns. It normally doesn't help to quell or dissuade violence. Is this normal procedure, though, for police departments to engage in misinformation campaigns and disinformation campaigns during events like this? This is not the FBI or the CIA. This is local police.
No, I mean it's certainly uncommon, but again, you're thinking about. I mean, when you watch the footage of this, and I've had the well, I won't call it the pleasure. I've had the opportunity to look at body cam videos of like massive crowds of violent, screaming individuals confronting a handful of police. I mean, they're abandoning police stations. That's
right,
where we're at.
I've been in some of those crowds in many different cities in America, and it is a terrifying situation. You think about the guy who did this, Brian Gernon. Evidently, he is also now a brigadier general in the Washington State National Guard, recently promoted. I guess from a leadership perspective, it just seems like such a really bad idea to start talking about how there's another group with guns. If you're trying to protect officers, talking about more people showing up with weapons seems exactly the opposite of what you'd want to do.
Yeah, I'm look, we have the benefit of hindsight. And in hindsight, I would agree with you and say, you know what, probably if you're going to try to ruse, it might have been a little had a better design and goal behind it.
Yeah, maybe say the National Guard showing up, not the Proud Boys. David, you make a great point. We sort of said it at the beginning that you have to look at things in the moment rather than with the benefit of hindsight sitting in a couple of nice studios. And we appreciate your perspective of this, especially someone who's taught these things and taught tactics and weapons as well. It's good to see you. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Yeah,
Pleasure.
Appreciate it. Tampa Bay's coach is channeling his inner Vince Lombardi. Is the NFL the last safe space for a no BS coach? That's next. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.